Hi, this is Lou Ann with Rockin Book Reviews, and I'm so happy to be here today with author Deb Mercier. Deb, it was really interesting searching for your information through Google, and it left a lot to be desired. Tell us a little bit about your life growing up, namely how many siblings you had, where you grew up, and maybe a few thoughts about instances that impacted your life.
Sure. I grew up in the Twin Cities area in Maple Grove, just north of Minneapolis. I would say I actually grew up in two places. Our main home was in Minneapolis, but then on weekends, I don't know if you're familiar with the Minnesota tradition of going up north. Everybody.
We have one in Utah too. It was hard for me to get used to when I moved here. Everything is up north.
Right. So same type of deal. We would go up north on the weekends to the Brainerd Lakes area. So I spent a lot of my childhood in the woods and on the lakes in the Brainerd Lakes area, as well as in the Twin Cities. I have one brother. He's about, depending on the time of year, he's either 3 or 4 years older than me. And he actually lives fairly close now, so that's nice. Some of my favorite activities were, of course, just being outside. When other kids were building sand castles, I would build frog castles. So I would go out to the lake and I'd build these elaborate sand castle type things, but then I would go catch frogs. I would make them go to the castle and take like rides on flip-flops and things like that.
Were you a tomboy?
Somewhat, yes.
I can relate.
Yeah, no, I had a good time. Other activities, I guess, that I really enjoyed were making sock puppets. It's actually how I met my best friend, still, one of my best friends to this day, Carrie. I went up to her in first grade and I said, "Do you want to do this?" And she said, "Sure." And so we just started like talking, doing the hand talking thing, and then we made puppets. And so I did that a lot growing up. Used to make my puppets sing to the radio. That was fun. When I was in elementary school, that's when I started playing flute, and that's something I still do to this day as well. So music was always a really important part of my life growing up as well. As far as things that impacted me, I think just talking about doing the dual citizenship, I guess you could call it, of the Twin Cities and the northern areas, that had a very big impact on me, especially being in the woods and on the lakes and sitting around the campfire and telling stories. Probably that setting had a very big impact on my writing today. And then another event in my life that probably I come back to quite a bit in writing, exploring different types of relationships. My mom passed away when I was 17. So that was a big impact on my life. And you can find bits and pieces of that and lots of her influence as well in my writing.
That void never goes away, does it?
No, there's nothing to fill it. It gets easier with time.
Yeah. Well, my mother lived till she was almost 91, and you're just never ready to lose your mom.
No.
And we had a good relationship, and she was my best friend, and it was, to this day, a day don't go by that I don't miss her and think about her and wish I could call her and so forth. So,
right. Yeah.
So I can't even imagine losing her at 17. That would have been so devastating to me. I don't know how I made it.
Yeah. I have a wonderful stepmom that has been with me for years and years and years and years and years, and she is absolutely amazing. So I'm thankful that I got to have her in my life as well.
Wow, I'm glad you were blessed that way. That's great. Okay, it sounds like a wonderful childhood to me, because I love those type of things. So
right.
Okay, you had writing opportunities in several different institutions. Name when you started writing and where, and the type of writing you did in each one.
Sure. I'll see if I can be specific.
Let me lay that on you.
Okay. I started, as far as professional writing, I started my career as a technical writer at a healthcare software company. So I would write online help systems for them.
And how old were you then?
How old was I? 24, 25? I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I was in my 20s. So I started as a tech writer, and then decided that I kind of really missed adjectives. And I went back to school when my kids were very small, went back to school for my MFA in creative writing. It took me about 4 years to do that, going part-time, and I would commute 2 hours each way to do classes. So I would go once a week. Tuesday evenings were my night to go to school for that master's degree. And I remember I had to take whatever class was offered on Tuesday afternoons. That's what I had to take because that's when I could be there. So I ended up with some really interesting classes.
I admire people like you. I think it's fantastic. I went when most of my kids were pretty much grown, and it was hard. I can't imagine with little ones going to school,
Right.
and I admire you.
Yeah. Well, and actually, it worked out well. I had lots of support from my husband, and that was really my night. So I would get Tuesday night, and then I would come home late, and get up in the morning and go to work on Wednesday morning. After 4 years, I had the opportunity to stay home with my kids. So I did that. I stayed home and doing a lot of creative writing, and actually put out a couple of books. And then later on, when they were bigger, I went back to work and started at the Polk County Tribune. I worked first as a proofreader and then became the news editor. And then after a while, they just said, just be editor. So that was fine. So I worked as the editor of a small town newspaper for quite a while, about 5 years, and absolutely loved it. It was a great job. Very different from the tech writing and from
I can
the
imagine.
creative writing, but I got to keep up the creative writing while I was working at the newspaper because I had a newspaper column, like a weekly humor column that I would write. I actually put that into a collection and sold that in book form as well.
How fun.
Yeah, they were fun. They were
I
my
think that
friends.
was wise because so often I find that people who have been in the newspaper business, journalists, they try to write a novel, and it's just so hard to connect with them because they're like reporting the news.
Right.
So that they leave out that personal feeling that you connect with. And
Right.
so I think it's great that you kept up your creative writing as well.
Yeah, that was very important. Had a lot of good feedback on the column and things like that, so that kind of kept me going. And then after a while, I decided it was time to get back into the tech writing world. So then I started at Douglas Machines. I'm still working there today. I work as a tech writer there, and it's very different from the first type of tech writing that I did. This is literally get on a humongo machine, climb around, figure out how it works, and tell other people how to run it. That was a big challenge too.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, you're not only a writer, but you're a musician, and you play with the Central Lakes Symphony Orchestra. How long have you played with them? When did you start, and so forth?
These questions about like when, I'm terrible with that. Like I've played with them for a lot of years. But if you would ask my husband, he would say, well, I started this in 1986, and he would know the day and the time. And I'm like, sometime I started with them. Been with them for many years. It's a volunteer orchestra. We do concerts that include groups like the Minnesota Opera. We do collaborative concerts each year with different artists from around the state and region. It's a fantastic group to play with. And actually this past in 2020, I remember this because it was 2020. In 2020, I actually did a collaboration with the orchestra. They had me write a children's book. It was called Catching the Waves, The Science of Sound, and that I can actually show you. I have that right here. Do you want to see it?
I was going to say, now that comes into the when you started writing children's books.
Okay. So this is Catching the Waves.
Okay.
The Science of Sound. And I got to show you the guy on the back because he's awesome.
So this is like a mad scientist.
Yes, this was my first foray into nonfiction, which was really, really fun. The director came up to me one day and said, so we're doing this collaboration concert in February. We're thinking it would be really cool. We're inviting all the area kids to come, and we're doing this concert about how sound is made.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. The music was great.
He wasn't insulted thinking you were depicting him in that drawing.
No, although he'd be fine with it. For the project, they wanted to come up with a book that they could give away to kids who came to the concert. This was their collaboration, to work with a local artist, come up with a children's book. The kicker was, though, he asked me this in October, November, December, January, February, 4 months.
Not much time.
Right. Do you think you could do that? And when should you have started? I said, probably last month, last year, something like that. But I found local artists that I've worked with before, and we were able to work together on this book, and it turned out fantastic. It was so much fun to do. I have to show you one of
nice
my
and
favorite.
colorful too.
Yes. I even got to do some little tech writing stuff with diagrams.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Little lion
Oh,
yelling
that
run.
is very creative. I like that.
Yeah, super fun. And luckily for me, Faith Mills, the artist who did all these beautiful, beautiful pastels for the book, she had no problem when I would say things like, okay, I want you to draw a sloth, but can you put a hat on him? And she's like, okay.
Oh my land. Oh, that is fantastic.
Isn't that great?
Oh, wow.
So we just had a blast.
That's a whole new perception on music.
Right. So the whole book is about how sound waves work and how your ears perceive sound and how they process everything. And so
that looks like a wonderful book.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun to work on. After that, I just doing the creative writing on my own, and then I was contacted by Ryan Jacobson to work on this new series that he's doing, the Detective You. I've worked with Ryan in the past before on some other book, and decided, why not dive right back into it.
Now, before we get into that, when all through Google, every time your name came up, I got Harry Potter. What connection are you to Harry Potter?
I don't know, but I'll take it. That's great.
It just blew my mind. I try all different avenues of putting your name in there, and it would always come up with Harry Potter.
Okay.
So I thought, did you ever write anything for Harry Potter?
I did not, but I did read it to my son when he was in kindergarten, and I've read the series about 5 times myself now, but
that is so crazy.
That's awesome.
My daughter in the 80s and early 90s really got into series of books, and she just loved them. And they were choose your own ending and all these different scenarios, and some were mysteries. They were all different genres. But they always, choose your own ending. And so she always liked that, because if she wasn't in a mood to have happily ever after, she'd choose the other ending and figure out how it ended herself. And yet I have another daughter that hated them. Now you are coming into a series that is similar, choose your own ending type. So can you explain more about that?
Sure. Do you want to know more about the format, or about
the series itself, and the book and your portion of it? And how many books is this going to be your only book, or are you going to write more?
Okay. Well, the Choose Your Own Adventure, Ryan Jacobson, Lake 7 creative publisher, we had done a few Choose Your Own Adventure type books before. One of the series, and they're actually being re-released in October as well. One of the series was taking classics like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Call of the Wild, things like that, and turning those into choose your own adventures for kids, so they are exposed to the classics. So I had done 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then Ryan and I co-wrote The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Those were called Can You Survive? And those were awesome.
See, I wish I'd known that, because my daughter had always wished that there were more books out there like that. I wasn't aware there was.
Right. Well, and these are fairly recent. We worked on, there was a Storm at the Summit. That one was about climbing Mount Everest. I can remember my daughter reading one of the drafts that I had done, and she was in her bedroom. All of a sudden, from down the hallway, I hear, Mom, I died again. Now you know what not to choose, or now you know what to put in your backpack.
So are there different scenarios listed in the book that they draw on then?
Yeah. So when you're reading a Choose Your Own Adventure, what happens is you're reading along, And all of a sudden you'll come to a page that says, just to keep it simple, do you want to turn left or do you want to turn right? So you choose. And then if you turn left, you go to a certain page. If you turn right, you go to a different page. Now, let's say right is not a very good decision. You might end up falling off a cliff. You might end up in a tunnel somewhere. You might end up lost in the woods. You might end, depending on the story. And then if you choose left, that's probably a good choice and you'll keep moving on in the story. And they don't always
something in there that stimulates that decision.
Yes, usually it's deductive reasoning. So especially with the new series that we're working on, Detective You, that's totally based on using deductive reasoning. So there are clues along the way as to what is probably a good choice and what's probably maybe not such a good choice. But there are also elements of randomness, I guess, in there. You're asked to pack things in your detective bag. So you might have a list of 10 things, like a flashlight or a rope or a mobile phone, or things that you might need to have with you. And along the way in the book, it might ask you, do you have a rope? If you have a rope, you go one way. If you don't have a rope, you go a different way. Now, maybe both of those ways will work, but maybe one of them won't work so well. It just really depends. Some of the storylines can get pretty complex as far as on the back end, not for the reader, but on the back end, how keeping track of where everything is and how everything is connected can get a little complex, but it's a really good challenge. I actually tried to map out Ghost of Old Central School. That's one of them coming out in October. So I sat down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put this in flowchart form. And so I'm drawing my little circles and arrows and boxes. And pretty soon I'm just like, I'm out of paper. I don't know.
So are there just the two choices, one way or the other?
Yes, usually. There's usually just the two choices. And based on that, you go to a page and that might circle you back around eventually. I should backtrack a little bit. There are also some pages in these Detective You books where it says something like, you need to investigate these suspects and come back to this page when you're done. So you go to different pages to find out clues about different suspects, and then you circle back to the main page.
People who, like I am, that like adventures, that would be great for. Now, how do you stimulate someone who is like my eldest daughter and she just wants it out there cut and dry and she don't want to guess anything? Is there some way you can stimulate their interest?
Well, I guess for that, I would say the writing has to be really good. The writing has to be interesting. The characters have to be interesting. You really want to draw your reader in with where they're at and what they're doing. So I would say to that, it's not necessarily, it is cut and dry. There is only one correct answer at the end. But it's more, I think, along the way, if you can capture interest with your writing, if you can capture interest and make them feel like they're a part of the story.
Oh, and that does sound challenging.
But it's so much fun. It's a ton of fun to write, and I think they're a ton of fun to read.
Doesn't it get you confused at times of where you're at?
Yes, that's why we do a lot of proofreading. And we also had for The Empty Cabin, that's another title coming out in October. I had my two nieces, Daisy and Lily. They read through that from cover to cover, and they read it out loud together and would make the choices. And then they would go back and they would, make sure. They were my logic checkers. They're both super readers, and they came up with some really, really good saves for us.
And how old are they?
Let's see. Lily is heading off to college. In the
older
fall.
Children.
Yes.
You look too young.
And Daisy's in high school. So we've got some backup readers, and I know Ryan sends his copy out to be read by others. I send my copy out to be read by others. Both Ryan and I will read through the final version and just tear it apart and put it back together and make sure that the logic is solid and it makes sense.
That sounds like a lot more in depth than just regular writing a novel.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to do this?
It was Ryan's idea. I can't claim any credit for that. He says he was a reluctant reader growing up, and these were the types of stories that really captured his interest. So he's really going for that. He really wants to encourage kids to read, and he was thinking that this series in particular would appeal to kids who are avid readers, and then also kids who maybe aren't quite so avid readers.
Beginning about what age?
About age 9 would be a good beginning age. Even 8 if
Depending
you're,
on maturity. And
and where you're at for reading level, things like that. But yeah, generally that 9.
well, that sounds exciting. And you are coming out with a cabin, you just mentioned. Tell us a little bit about your book.
The Empty Cabin, that one is, I know we were talking earlier about my background in going back and forth between the Twin Cities and northern Minnesota. The Empty Cabin it's not specifically northern Minnesota, but it is set in a northern resort setting. And basically you are the main character. You are Sam. You are the child of the resort owners and you work there. You have a favorite guest that has been coming there for 5 years, and her name is Loretta. She's kind of a cranky old lady. Everyone thinks she's a cranky old lady, but she's really a sweetheart. So the two of you have become good friends, and you and Loretta each year do some really fabulous hikes together. She is a stickler for time. You set a time to take a hike and you show up to take this hike, but Loretta doesn't. So your job becomes to figure out what happened to Loretta and solve the mystery of her empty cabin.
Now, that isn't your first one, though, correct?
This is the first in the Detective U series.
It is. Okay, so how many more are you planning on doing? Are you going to be doing a steady series that's ongoing?
Yes.
And is there other people involved other than you and Brian?
Actually, not yet. We'll see as we go along. Right now, I'm the sole author of the series. We're going to take it a couple books at a time. So the two that are coming out in October are The Empty Cabin and The Ghost of Old Central School. Those two will come out October 11th. Then
fit right in with Halloween.
Yes, that'll be perfect. And then there are 2 more books in the series coming out in the spring. Those will be The Fortune Teller's Curse and The Captured Eagle. So those will be the first 4 in the series.
So what is your next big project?
The next big project would be the next two in the series. So The Fortune Teller's Curse and The Captured Eagle. Those are the next 2 that I'll be concentrating on.
So what led you to write children's book?
That's a really good question. Part of it is when I was doing that master's degree, I took a class in young adult fantasy literature, and I absolutely fell in love with that genre. I have a lot of respect for children's writers. I suppose the other thing is that when my kids were little, we read out loud from before they could even sit up. I would lay on the floor and I would hold a book up like this and we would sit and read together. That was our thing. I absolutely love children's literature. I love the artwork. I love everything that goes into it. So I guess that was a big inspiration, was just reading to my own kids.
And you mentioned you have a humorous book. Is that for adults? And what's the name of that?
That one is called My Book. And it's My Book. It's based on anything that starts with my is really annoying. I actually wrote an entire column about that. So that became the title of the book, was My Book. That one, I believe you can search for it on Amazon. Otherwise, I have copies available as well. But yeah, title of the newspaper column was called Backspace. So the full title is My Book, a Backspace Collection.
Sounds fantastic. I like a little bit of everything. So anyhow, it's been so great meeting with you. And we have a giveaway. Some lucky US Canada winner will receive a print copy of The Empty Cabin that's coming out. And anyone else outside of the US Canada area will receive an e-copy. And is there any final word before we close?
Just that I'm really, really excited about this series that's coming up. Just check it out, I hope.
I'm anxious to share it with my daughter because she's got children now, and 3 boys, and she'll be interested because she's having struggle with her 9 and 10-year-old reading.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's the perfect age. And these are just so much fun to dig into. And there's lots of action and adventure and a little bit of danger thrown in there. And they're really, really fun books.
Well, sounds like it. I'm actually interested to read it. So
that sounds good.
Okay. And we want to encourage all of you to search the universe through books. Bye now.